I'm 64. I live on the edge of a small town in Pennsylvania where winter shows up early and news travels faster than an ambulance. People here don't say much to your face, but they notice everything. Who's got their porch light on, who's getting mail from a lawyer, who's suddenly forgetful. They also remember my husband, Frank Carter. 2 years ago, they told me he died in a robbery. The farm supply store we owned had its alarm go off late at night. Frank drove over because that's who he was. Steady, protective, the kind of man who believed you didn't ignore a problem and hope it went away. The next morning, they found his truck on a muddy shoulder, glass scattered like ice, a torn jacket on the ground that still smelled like smoke and engine oil. Frank wasn't there. The local police called it simple. Armed robbery, victim confronted the suspect fled. They gave me a thin report and a practiced apology. Then they wanted me to sign paperwork that would close the investigation due to lack of leads. I didn't sign. I can't even explain why. Maybe widows run on instinct before reason. Maybe some stubborn part of me refused to accept that Frank, careful Frank, organized Frank, would disappear without leaving a trail. For 2 years, I waited for a sign. It came at a Greyhound station at 5:12 in the morning. I was standing under fluorescent lights that made everyone look sickly, hugging a paper bag of old documents like I was holding cold ashes. I wasn't traveling for anything exciting. I was going to the county office to get yet another copy of a form I'd already filled out 3 times. That had become my life, proving on paper that my husband existed. A man sat down beside me. He wasn't flashy. Mid-60s maybe. Average coat. Eyes that didn't dart around the way nervous people's do. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't smile. He didn't ease into conversation. He just said my name. Evelyn Carter. I froze, because in a town like mine, strangers don't know your name unless someone told them. He set something in my palm, a locker key. It was so cold it stung through my skin. Your husband hid this, he said, low and steady. Tonight they're coming. Don't sign anything. I turned to ask him who he was, but he stood up and disappeared into the moving crowd, like he'd never been there at all. I stared at the key until my eyes blurred. Then I walked to the lockers with shaking knees. The key fit. The door swung open. Inside was a black USB drive. A thick piece of paper folded twice. And a photo. A photo that made my heart drop so hard it felt like it sank into my lungs. My son, Ryan, was in that picture. He was smiling, and he was shaking hands with Mason Pike, the man everyone in town called the robber, the man the police had blamed for Frank's death. There was no gun, no struggle, no fear, just 2 men standing close like business partners, a metal warehouse door behind them. My son's smile calm and easy, like he wasn't shaking hands with the devil. My phone buzzed. Ryan. Like he could sense that I'd just opened a door he never wanted me to find. Mom? His voice was warm, careful. You free tomorrow? I set up an appointment with a lawyer. I think we should straighten some things out. I stared at the photo. Straighten what out? I asked, and only then realized my cheeks were wet. He paused just a beat too long. I'm worried about you, he said. You're alone. You've been forgetting things. I don't want you signing something you don't understand. It's for your own good. I hung up without answering. Not because I was brave, because if I listened to him one more second, I was going to fall apart in a public bus station with strangers stepping over my grief. I drove home like I was carrying an explosive. I locked the door, bolted it, drew the curtains even though it was still early. Every creak in my old house sounded like footsteps. I laid the items on my kitchen table. USB, deed, photo. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I plugged the USB into Frank's old laptop, the one I'd kept because it still had his fingerprints on the trackpad, his little passwords saved, tiny traces of him. A single folder popped up. For Evelyn. If you're seeing this, I'm sorry. My throat closed. I clicked it. A video opened. Frank sat in our barn, the tool shelf behind him. He looked thinner than I remembered. Tired. The kind of tired that lives under your eyes when you've been awake too many nights. He looked straight into the camera. Eve, he said, voice rough. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. I clapped my hand over my mouth so I wouldn't scream. He continued, slow and deliberate, like he'd weighed every word. I did something I couldn't tell you. I was trying to keep you safe. But you need to hear me. Don't trust anyone just because they're family, especially if they're rushing you. He swallowed. Our land isn't just land. It's what they want. And if they get you to sign, they'll take everything. The video cut. Just like that. Like he didn't have time for comfort. Like he knew comfort could get me killed. I sat in silence until the hum of the refrigerator sounded like a roar. Then I unfolded the paper from the locker. A deed. Not a normal deed. This was legal language, trust language, ink so crisp it felt like it had been printed yesterday. Frank had placed our property into a family trust before the robbery. There were restrictions. No sale, no transfer, no refinancing without specific signatures, independent evaluations, and a clause that made my stomach tighten. Any attempt to remove Evelyn Carter's decision-making capacity shall trigger an automatic review and oversight provision. Frank had planned for someone to try and declare me incompetent, which meant he'd planned for Ryan. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Kendra, my daughter-in-law. Mom, we scheduled a quick memory screening tomorrow. Just routine. Once the doctor signs off, everything will be easier. Love you. I read it twice. Easier, I whispered. Easier like silk handcuffs. I went into Frank's office, the room I'd avoided for 2 years because it still smelled faintly like his aftershave and dust and the winter air he'd bring in on his coat. I opened a drawer. Inside was a small notebook, the kind Frank always carried. On the first page, in his neat slanted handwriting, if they come sooner than you think, remember, good people don't rush. Bad people always do. I pressed my fingers to the words until my knuckles hurt. And for the first time since he vanished, something in me hardened into purpose. If my son wanted to turn my life into paperwork, I was going to make sure the paperwork told the truth. Ryan and Kendra arrived the next morning like they were visiting for Sunday dinner. They brought me a sweet latte I hadn't ordered and didn't want. They asked me how I slept. They looked around my kitchen with little glances that felt less like concern and more like inventory. Mom, you seem tired, Ryan said, voice gentle. I've been hearing things. Hearing what? I asked. Kendra smiled, sweet as pie. Oh, you know, that you've been leaving your door unlocked, that you've been forgetting appointments. People worry. People. That word, people, made my skin crawl. Because in a small town, people usually means someone we sent to talk. Ryan pulled a folder out of his bag and slid it across my table. The title hit me like a slap. Petition for guardianship. He placed a pen on top like it was a gift. Mom, he said softly, I'm not forcing you, but we think this is best. It's just so I can help you manage things. Bills, paperwork. You don't need stress. Kendra leaned forward, eyes wide and caring. It's to protect you from outsiders, Mom. You know, scammers. People who take advantage of older women. Older women, like I was a type of prey. I picked up the pen and felt the weight of it. I looked at Ryan's face. The face I'd kissed as a baby. The face I'd held to my chest when he cried after his first heartbreak. And I thought about that photo, his hand in Mason Pike's. I set the pen down. I need time, I said quietly. I need to read it. Ryan's jaw tightened for a second before he smoothed his expression. Of course, us, he said. But Mom, please don't make this hard. If you won't sign voluntarily, I can still file. And then the court could appoint a stranger. You don't want that, right? It was a threat wrapped in a blanket. After they left, a police cruiser appeared in my driveway. Deputy Holt stepped out with that same bored professionalism he'd used when he told me Frank's case was going cold. Mrs. Carter, he said, not looking me in the eyes, we got a welfare check request. Reports say you may be struggling to care for yourself. Who reported that? I asked. He shrugged. Anonymous. He looked around my living room like he was searching for proof I was slipping. He asked if I'd eaten, if I had heat, if I'd been confused. When he left, he said, "You should listen to your son. He cares." And there it was, plain and ugly. They had the police. Or at least, they had someone. That night, I went deeper into the USB. It wasn't just the video. There were screenshots of texts, spreadsheets of transfers, a company name, Hollow Ridge Development. My stomach turned as I scrolled. Then I found it. A message thread. Ryan, she won't sell. I need a legal way. Mason, guardianship? Someone local can make it clean. Ryan, and the old man? Mason, handled. Keep your mouth shut. I stared at the word handled until the letters stopped looking real. My legs gave out. I sank to the floor by my kitchen cabinet, cold tile against my thighs. I made a sound I didn't recognize, half gasp, half sob, because the grief I'd been carrying suddenly grew teeth. Frank hadn't just been robbed. He'd been removed, and my son had known. I backed everything up to a second drive, printed what I could, took photos with my phone of the deed, the trust documents, the texts. Then I called the only lawyer Frank ever trusted, Diane Whitmore. She answered, voice low. "Evelyn? Honey? Are you okay?" "No," I whispered. "I have proof, and my son is trying to take guardianship." Her inhale was sharp. "Don't sign anything. Do you hear me? Don't sign. Bring whatever you have tomorrow morning." I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the hair rise on my arms like my body already knew what was coming. That night, someone tried to pry open my barn lock. I heard metal scraping, footsteps on gravel. I turned off the lights and stood behind the curtain, holding my breath so hard my chest burned. A shadow crossed the barn window, then it was gone. In the morning, my lock was bent, scratched raw. Someone had tried. Someone knew. I drove to Diane's office at sunrise. The door was locked. A sign was taped to the glass. "Closed today due to personal emergency." I called. No answer. My throat tightened. On the way home, I noticed Ryan's truck behind me. Not tailgating, not obvious, just present. When I pulled into my driveway, he was already there, standing on my porch like he owned it. "Mom," he said, smile too controlled. "I heard you were going to see Diane. You don't need to bother her." My mouth went dry. "How did you know?" "I worry," he said. "You're doing dangerous things." "Dangerous for who?" I asked. His smile slipped. "Mom," he said, voice dropping, "you just need to sign. If you keep fighting, you're going to get hurt." Kendra stepped out of the truck holding a grocery bag, the perfect picture of caring family. "Mom, the doctor's ready," she said brightly. "It's just a memory test. Easy, no stress." They were standing in my doorway talking about my mind like it was a broken appliance. I remembered Frank's note. Bad people always rush. So I did something that made my stomach twist. I acted weak. I let my shoulders slump. I let my eyes drop like I was defeated. "Okay," I whispered. "I'm tired. I'll cooperate. Just give me one day. One day to go through Frank's things. I don't want to leave this house without touching him one more time." Kendra's face softened, triumphant. Ryan studied me like he didn't quite trust it. "One day," he said, "but no calls, no visitors." "I'm serious." I nodded. They left. The second their truck disappeared, I moved like I was running out of oxygen. I hid the originals under the floorboard in Frank's office, inside an old cookie tin. I kept only copies with me. Then I waited. Because now I knew something else. Frank had planned for this, which meant there had to be someone on the outside. Someone like the man at the bus station. And if he'd known my name, he'd known where I lived. At 2:11 a.m., my landline rang. I hadn't used it in months. Frank had kept it just in case, because he didn't trust cell service. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the receiver. "Mrs. Carter?" A woman's voice, steady, firm. "This is Special Agent Hallie Brooks. I was told you opened the locker." My lungs locked. Who told you?" I whispered. "The man at the station," she said. "Alvarez, he's ours." I swallowed, tasting metal. Listen to me, Brooks said. You're being targeted, and what they want isn't just land. Frank Carter has been cooperating with us. My heart snapped tight. Frank. Frank is dead. There was a pause. Not long, just enough to change the air in my kitchen. Then she said, carefully, like she was placing a fragile thing into my hands, Frank Carter is alive. I slid down into my chair like my bones quit. I couldn't speak. Brooks continued. I can't explain everything over the phone, but you need to stay calm. Tomorrow they will try to force your signature. You will not sign. You will follow my instructions. Do you understand? I pressed my free hand to my chest like I could hold my heart in place. I understand. And Evelyn, she said softly, Frank didn't leave you. He did this so you could live. After I hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen and let the truth hit me in waves. Frank was alive, which should have felt like a miracle. But miracles come with grief too. Because if he was alive, it meant he'd watched me mourn him for 2 years. And if he'd had to do that, it meant the danger was bigger than my little town. Ryan and Kendra came early the next morning. They didn't bring coffee this time. They brought a lawyer in a suit and a woman with a clipboard. Social worker. She introduced herself, smiling like she was already sorry for me. Kendra walked in like this was her house. Let's make this easy, Mom. The lawyer slid papers across my table. Ryan placed the pen down. Just sign, he said quietly. No drama. I remembered Brooks. Play weak, but keep the rhythm. I sat slowly. I let my hands tremble just enough. Then I looked up at Ryan. Before I sign, I said, voice thin, I want to ask you something. His eyes narrowed. What? I pulled the photo out of my drawer and set it on the table. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost comical. Kendra's smile froze. Where did you get that? Ryan snapped. In a locker, I said. At the bus station. A stranger gave me the key. He said Dad hid it. The lawyer's eyes flicked to Ryan, the first crack of doubt. Ryan forced a laugh. Mom, that could be fake. Someone's messing with you. Then this is fake too? I asked, placing the deed beside it. Kendra's breath hitched. I placed the USB down last. This has your texts, I said softly. Your transfers, Kendra's company, and one word I can't stop reading. Ryan stood so fast his chair scraped. Mom, he hissed, you don't know what you're doing. Oh, I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. I think I finally do. Kendra lunged for the USB. I stepped back. Don't, I warned. I have copies, and I've already given them to someone else. It was only half true, but it stopped her cold. Ryan's eyes looked different, not worried, not loving, calculating. That was the moment I fully understood something I'd been refusing to admit. This wasn't my boy making a mistake. This was a man making a move. 3 days later, the guardianship hearing took place in county court. Ryan arrived dressed like a grieving saint. Kendra wore soft colors and watery eyes. They carried medical notes about memory concerns and confusion. They talked about me like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. She's vulnerable, their lawyer said. She's at risk. We only want to help. I stood when it was my turn. I wore Frank's gray coat, the one that still smelled like pine and cold air. My name is Evelyn Carter, I said. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for the right to be myself. I submitted the deed, the trust documents, the photo, the printed texts and transfers from the USB. Their lawyer tried to object. This is irrelevant to capacity. I looked straight at the judge. Your Honor, I said, voice shaking now from something deeper than fear. If my son truly believed I was incompetent, why is he rushing to control my property? Why does he call it a legal way in his messages? If I lose capacity, I become the easiest path to bypass my husband's trust. The courtroom murmured. The judge, middle-aged, tired eyes, no nonsense, leaned forward and asked to see the evidence. Ryan's face tightened. Kendra's hands wrung together in her lap. Then the courtroom door opened. A woman walked in wearing a plain coat, badge flashing under the lights. Your Honor, she said, voice clear. Special Agent Hallie Brooks. The materials presented here are directly connected to an ongoing federal investigation involving money laundering, real estate fraud, and local corruption. The room went silent. Ryan shot to his feet. This is a family matter. Brooks looked at him like he was a line item. No, she said. This is criminal. Kendra stood, voice sharp. You can't. A federal agent stepped to her side. Ma'am, you're being detained for questioning. Kendra's scream was raw, nothing sweet left in it. Her mask shattered in one sound. Ryan turned to me, eyes red. Mom, what did you do? I stared at him, and my voice came out cracked but honest. I didn't do anything to you, I said. You did it to your father. Ryan's mouth twisted. Dad's dead. You're insane. Brooks didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Frank Carter is alive, she said, and he's here to testify. My knees almost buckled. The door opened again. A man stepped in, slowly, like he was afraid he'd break me just by walking too fast. He was thinner, older, more gray at the temples, but his shoulders, his posture, the way he held his breath before speaking. I knew him like I knew my own heartbeat. Frank. I didn't remember standing. I just remember my hand flying to my mouth, the sound that escaped me, the way the air in the room seemed to tilt. Frank looked at me, eyes shining, and said one word. Eve. I made a broken, desperate sound and tried not to fall apart. Ryan stood frozen, face pale like paper. Frank turned to him, and his expression wasn't rage. It was worse. It was disappointment so deep it felt like grief. Son, Frank said quietly, I've heard enough. Ryan stammered. Dad, this isn't... Frank addressed the judge and then Brooks. He explained in plain language that he'd discovered Hollow Ridge Development was a shell. That money was moving through local deals, property flips, fake invoices. That when he spoke up, he was warned. That the robbery was a message, and he'd been pulled into witness protection to keep the case alive. But I was wrong about one thing, Frank said, voice thick. I thought I could protect my wife by disappearing. I didn't realize they'd use our own son to try to steal her voice. I could have hated him in that moment for the pain. I could have loved him. I felt both. Ryan's face twisted like a cornered animal. You left us, he shouted. You left Mom. You left me. I was supposed to survive. Frank didn't shout back. He just shook his head slowly. You didn't survive, Frank said. You sold your soul. Two agents moved toward Ryan. Ryan's eyes snapped to mine. Mom, he said, voice breaking. You picked him. You picked him over me. My heart cracked in a place I didn't know it could crack, and I said the only thing that was true. I picked the truth, I whispered. You picked the lie. The judge denied the guardianship petition on the spot and referred the case to criminal court. Federal agents escorted Kendra out, still screaming. Ryan was placed in cuffs, eyes wild, insisting he was helping. As they led him away, he looked back at me one last time like he was a boy again, and for a split second, I saw the child I'd loved. Then the hallway door closed, and the sound was final. A few months later, Pine Hollow looked the same. Same diners, same church sign, same cold wind off the hills. But I wasn't the same woman. Hollow Ridge Development was raided. Records seized. A couple of local officials were placed on leave. Deputy Holt was suspended pending investigation. People in town started whispering different whispers now. About corruption, about how long it had been going on, about who must have known. I listened, but I didn't celebrate. Because justice doesn't erase grief. Ryan faced charges that made my head spin. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted exploitation, money laundering. Kendra took a plea deal that didn't make her look brave. It made her look desperate. And me? I learned how to lock my life down the way Frank always had, but with my eyes open this time. My attorney updated the trust. We added safeguards against abusive guardianship petitions. I named an independent medical advocate and built a paper wall around my autonomy. Frank couldn't simply come home and sit on the porch like nothing happened. Witness protection doesn't fold up neatly like a blanket. But he could meet me carefully in approved places, quiet diners, parks with wide open sightlines, little moments stolen back from the years we lost. The first time we were alone in a small room after court, he reached for my hand like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I'm sorry, Mish, he said. Eve, I'm so sorry. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to collapse into him. Instead, I touched his face, just to feel warmth, just to prove he wasn't another ghost made of paperwork and memory. You're alive, I whispered. He nodded, eyes wet. I'm alive, and I'm here so no one ever turns you into a signature again. Some nights, I was angry. Really angry. I'd stand at my sink and shake because I'd spent 2 years grieving a man who was breathing somewhere else. And some nights, I understood. He'd chosen a pain he thought I could survive. He'd just underestimated how cruel people become when money is close enough to taste. One evening, months later, Frank was allowed to visit the property for a few hours under strict conditions. He stood on the porch looking at the wind chimes he'd hung years ago, the same chimes that had kept ringing through my worst nights. You kept the house, he said softly. I swallowed. I kept it because I didn't know where else to put my love. He stared at the yard, blinking hard. Thank you for not signing. I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a sob at the same time. I didn't sign because of a stranger at the bus station, I said. Because of a key. You owe that man. Frank looked at me, voice cracking. I owe you. We didn't talk about forgiveness like it was a light switch. We talked about it like it was weather, something you live through, something that changes slowly. And Ryan? I don't know what the future holds for him. I don't know if I'll ever be able to sit across from him without shaking. Loving your child doesn't automatically mean you can protect them from consequences. Sometimes love looks like telling the truth, even when it breaks you. That's the part people don't understand when they ask if I feel guilty. They ask it like guilt is optional, like a mother can turn it off, but here's what I know. Sitting on my porch as winter comes back around, they tried to turn me into paperwork. They tried to make my life a procedure. They tried to wrap theft in legal language and call it care. And I, an older woman with shaking hands and a broken heart, stood up in court and spoke the truth out loud. So if you're here to tell me I should have kept quiet for the family, tell me what family is exactly when your own son tries to steal your voice. Because I didn't choose revenge. I chose to live. And for the first time in 2 years, when the wind chimes ring, it doesn't sound like mourning. It sounds like breath.